guys, welcome to another battle report. So this is a battle report between Dread Elves and Vampire Covenant. I've been tooling around a little bit with Dread Elves by now, and this is a bit of a fluffy list. It goes way over in points and core, but it was a list that I wanted to try. So I wanted to try once again a dragon, and I wanted to try the interaction with the Beastmaster, with Kraken, and also the Gorgons. In addition, I was curious to see the performance of some Shadow Riders on the table, and I wanted to see how Harpies actually play out on the battlefield. I feel like they're not good, not that good at least, but then again, I might be wrong. In addition, I was tempted by just running limited magic in this army, because with a battle oracle, with a divination battle oracle, you have a wizard adept. You can get away practically with just an adept with some kind of bound spell, and that might be sufficient for magic phase. I mean, you're gonna cast Know Thy Enemy, Fate's Judgment, the Scrying Bubble, depending on the matchup that you find yourself in. You can just 4 dice or even 5 dice these spells. If you 4 dice both of them, then yeah, you're going to get one of them in a bubble. The militants are going to benefit from either with having an additional strength and getting either distracting and hard target, or getting +2 offensive defensive and +2 agility. So I guess for a militant list, you don't need that much magic. You might want a second Temple Legate to switch up a little bit of your magic. But then again, I think this loadout is quite decent. You can also still take the Hereditary, because you still have quite some wounds in the army, and against some armies this might help. So for example, against some really potent ranged armies, you can take the Scrying Bubble and the Hereditary. And then, well, Cynron's Gambit is the bound spell that is available to Dread Elves as a Dread Elf only item. It gives you the wheel turn spell. I don't know how useful it is in this army in particular, because it's mostly going to be useful once you fight stuff that is difficult to hit for your Dread Elves, or is difficult to wound for your Dread Elves, and it feels like this is not really something that the Dread Elves generally have a lot of trouble with. So I am contemplating just exchanging it for the Lightning Rod to get 2d6 strength 3 somewhere, which is something that Dread Elves might struggle with, because you don't have a lot of ranged output on longer range. So that's going to be the army. I'm just going to try it out and see how it goes. My opponent is playing with Vampire Covenant. He is playing with a zombie-themed army. I have tried this before myself, but I overloaded on the Necromancers that were Wizard Adepts. Wizard Apprentices, sorry, so I actually ended up with not a lot of channel in my list. My opponent went for the really fluffy way of going for Nosferatu, taking some Necromancers with a Vampire count with a Zombie Dragon, because, well, it's also a zombie. Then he filled up his core with zombies, and then in the special, in the Suffering section, he took double raids that have the blood ties with the Nosferatu Vampire to allow you to take a champion. He has the Cadaver Wagons to support the zombies, and he has an Altar of Undeath, which I was the most scared of, to be honest. Yeah, so the setup of his Lord is pretty standard, I think, for Nosferatu. So he does take the Bloodland Magic power, and I think this is a really strong power on Nosferatu, and probably also the reason why you take Nosferatu, as well as Cosmology. Because Cosmology can really boost up your troops quite drastically. He also has a Wisdom Master on Evocation for the other important spells. Yeah, and then the rest of the list follows quite normally from the start. I guess army design wise, it's not a good choice to have as a colossal zombie dragon. And I would, next time we would play, I would split up the zombies a little bit more, maybe even take a bit more zombies, so that you have 6 units at least, and you can really get some good uses out of your Arises. Yeah, the Cadaver Wagons, I feel like they're not really pulling their weight currently. I think another Altar of the Undeath would have been better. And the raids, yeah, they are so incredibly vulnerable. So it really makes it matchup dependent. Um, and yeah, witchcraft seems to be really necessary if you're playing with raids, just for the Raven's Wing spell, even though the champions of the units can also take it. However, if you start to invest into magic to move your raids around, you're not raising again. And then I think there's a really neat interaction between the zombies and the raids, but there's also a very bad hampering of the performance of both units because they both are really magic dependent, and yeah, that really hampers the list. Before we go into the game, here's some pictures of the armies. So first the Dread Elves, and here the Shadow Raiders have already vanguarded up to put some pressure onto the Vampire Covenant lines. And here in this picture you can see some reinforcements for the Vampire Covenant. So the zombies, there's so many zombies. And here they are deployed. So the zombie dragon is keeping a bit of an overwatch over his lines. And we have a lot of zombies on the field already. So there's going to be more. So here we go into the battle. The deployment type was marching columns, and the objective was capture the flags. As I was able to choose stable sides, I just stayed on the side of the hill. We used just a way of deploying terrain by just randomly putting it on the board and scattering it a couple of inches, I believe 2d6, in a random direction, which is how we ended up with this huge forest ruin lump in the left. So with marching columns and capture the flags, I am kind of confident. I mean, I do have a lot of scoring units in my army, so it is going to be easy for my opponent to get some points for the scenario in that way. Because also, well, my units of 18 temple militants they might seem a lot, but in the end it's only 18 wounds. And the obsidian guard is also a scoring unit that is really easy to take off the table if my opponent is just able to do 10 wounds on them. On the other side, I have a lot of zombies that I can just walk towards, and probably if I am able to get into combat rather unharmed, I am going to be able to do a lot of damage to my opponent. However, I have to be a little bit quick at this because the altar of Endeav of my opponent is going to get more and more powerful with every game turn. So there is a little bit of urge for me to get there. I quickly readjusted the camera because my opponent was deploying in the single corner of the field that I didn't really have a good focus on. So with this readjusted camera, we are going to continue. And yeah, marching columns. I think marching columns is quite punishing to Vampire Covenant players, because for Vampire Covenant it is quite important to have your army centered in some space, and it is going to be probably with all the other deployments also applicable that your opponent is going to know quite fast, quite quickly where your army is going to go. However, with marching columns, this is a little bit more amplified even, I believe. So my opponent, he first did deploy the Great Bats. This is already an indication that he's going to try to go into this side of the field. I think, personally, I would have deployed the Great Bats a little bit more in the back, so that he could still have deployed further in the other corner, because then you can put the dragon in the middle. The Great Bats can march 18 inches first turn, and then in the next turn they're already ready to chaff, basically. Well, this is the deployment that we ended up with. For me, it was mostly the militants that I deployed on the right that I had to start with because I didn't know yet where my opponent was going to go. I deployed the Shadow Riders after because they were going to be quite mobile. And by that point, I got quite confident that my opponent was going to deploy the rest of his force over there because then the rates were already down. So I did deploy some Spear Elves, and then a zombie block came down. So then I was quite confident that my opponent was going to stay in the left corner of the field, which was quite nice for me, because then I could focus all of my forces there. The only unit that is likely not seeing a lot of play is going to be the Temple Militants, but it's good to have a unit in your backlines to cover your approach. Yeah, and then the final thing that I did was to deploy my dragon in such a way that he's out of 32 inches of my opponent's dragon, so that's impossible for my opponent to, of the necromancer, I believe. So it's impossible for his necromancer to march up towards me 8 inches and then cast Touch of the Reaper, because that is a spell that I do not want to catch with my dragon. So the other spells that are quite dangerous for my dragon are Hasten the Hour and Touch of the Heart of Cosmology. I don't believe my opponent picked Touch of the Heart, but then again, he also needs his magic to raise some zombies to bolster his lines. His first magic phase went quite bad. So the first spell he cast, I believe he just had a 2 on 2 dice, and the second spell was a 4 on 3 dice or so. So there were some wasted dice there. In the end, he still managed to get 2 arises through on the block of zombies in the middle, bolstering up their numbers with an extra 20 something zombies. So this unit is pretty beefed up now with about 60 bodies or so, a little bit more even. Um, but yeah, the deployment and the approach of my opponent is kind of what I expected. So he just pushes up some zombies, he keeps a necrobunker in the back. His dragon keeps a bit of an overwatch, and the altar of Undeath is going to be protected until it's a little bit more potent. My approach is going to be quite offensive, so my infantry mostly marches up as far as they can. My Gorgons are going to go into a position where next turn they can get a guaranteed charge off. And the Gorgons actually are quite a good counter against raids also. Because of the Petrifying Stare. The Petrifying Stare is a magical attack. So before we are going to swing any attacks, my opponent has to take 6 tests, and on a 4+ he's going to get a wound. And then against these he only has a 5 of Aegis. So likely he will lose 2 wounds against that. And then he will still get 15 attacks from the Gorgon, sitting on 2+, wounding on 2+. He does have a 3-up Aegis save against those, but that still might result in 2 or 3 wounds. Yeah, and then the unit is kind of gone of his. He's not going to do too much damage probably to my unit. So that would be quite a good trade for me if he were to charge into my Gorgon. So I'm quite confident just pushing them up a bit more, because I don't expect a charge from him. In his second turn, he indeed doesn't charge anything. He just consolidates his lines. I tried to bait him into a charge with my um, Shadow Riders on the right, but he didn't. I think it's a good thing not to do that. With Vampire Counts the Dragon, it's an interesting piece because your general is really needed near your lines. With a Von Karstein Dragon with commanding presence of 24 inches, this is a little bit less the case. Yet still, yeah, you still need to make sure that everything is kind of in your bubble. Also, losing your general is really a big thing in Vampire Covenant, especially if you play with a lot of raids, because the discipline is rather poor, and yeah, this single roll of crumbling can really make a difference on these units. Yeah, so my opponent is just pushing up a bit. Second magic phase, he's gonna try to grow some more zombies, gonna try to do some damage to me. I believe he tried to cast Eyes on Fire. This is the one spell that I would not want to get on my Shadow Riders. Otherwise, his Necromancer is still out of range of my dragon, unfortunately. So he is not able to cast Touch of the Reaper on him, I believe. He did have another spell that I don't remember what I dispelled. I believe in the end he did get Unity and Divergence on my Temple Militants, so he killed 10 Temple Militants there, which was quite a good roll for him, or quite a good spell to get through. But then again, I still have some extra units to sacrifice, so this one hit on the Temple Militants, it really cripples the unit. It gives them a different role for the rest of the battle. But I have to take some damage somewhere in the game. So I'm quite okay with it being on these Temple Militants. It is a juicy target for my opponent as they don't have any substantial armor. But then again, yes, one unit has to take the hit. Next turn, my turn too. I'm gonna charge everywhere I can, practically. I do manage to get into contact both with my dragon and with my gorgons and with my kraken into his big unit of zombies. I'm just going to try to whittle this down as quickly as I can. I didn't want to lose the dragon to static combat res or bad rolls, so I just wanted to have it in there together with the gorgons, together with the kraken, just to make sure that they would generate so much combat res that it would be impractical for my opponent to countercharge with anything, basically, because this would only result in more crumbling for me. Yeah, and the Red Legionnaires on the left, they unfortunately didn't make it to charge the zombies on the left. I was going to go for the charge. I needed a 7. Alternatively, I could have walked up, and I was like, yeah, I'll just go for the charge. I might make it. If I make it, that's good. If I don't make it, it's also fine, because I don't really want to do anything else. The Shadow Riders on the right, they consolidate to a different position to threaten the Altar of Undeath a bit. And I was a bit intrigued about how my opponent was going to protect his Altar of Undeath there. Yeah, then the Obsidian Guard, they just go in to deal some damage next turn, and the rest of the lines move up. The repeater auxiliaries, they shoot at some zombies with the lack of any other target with their limited range. And I do manage to, I think it was Fate's Judgment that I managed to cast on my opponent's raids on the right. So I was leaving like 2 models, and then the repeater battery managed to blink off another one. So there's only 1 raid left. Yeah, that really feels good. Yeah, raids are really a nuisance, but if you manage to cripple them from your opponent, then it really helps. Because growing them back is just a pain. So the unit of raids on the right is just severely crippled now. It has to consolidate back into my opponent's lines. It has to be raised again. 1 wound per casting. You do have gates of the underworld, of the netherworld, to help you out there. Yet still, it's not ideal. Yeah, so this is the board state right now. I do manage to smack quite a lot of zombies with my dragon, kraken, and gorgons. However, they don't manage to do just enough damage. I believe in total I removed about 40 zombies. That's quite a lot. It was quite a lot. But obviously my opponent is going to try to undo the damage that I'm doing there. The only real downside of a zombie list is that you don't really have any tools to take away models of your opponent. So the zombies of my opponent are now facing just Gorgons, which have resilience for defensive 5, I believe. So that is quite good. And a 5 Vegas, but still all the attacks that my opponent rolled quite miserably there. But with the, I think it's 14 attacks that you have, you should expect 4 or 5 hits, like 2 wounds in the end, and then yeah, maybe you're gonna do a wound, maybe 2 wounds, maybe 0 wounds. It's the damage output of zombies is literally horrific. And Ancestral 8 does really help there with a reroll to hit. Yet, are you gonna spend your magic boosting up zombies? I think it's not that good. So the zombie list, in my view, I think it really benefits from having really big units of crypto horrors. Because they also pair really well with cosmology perception of strength. So allowing them from strength 4 to go to strength 5 with AP2 with a reroll to hit if you're grinding anyway. That is really majestic. Yeah, so this was my opponent's turn, and his magic phase actually this turn was not that good. We put some dice behind the zombie unit in the middle to indicate how many zombies there were. I believe he raised about 20 zombies back again. However, with this magic setup that he had, I think that is quite a poor result, because he spent a lot of dice on casting some spells in the start of the round, and then he still had 2 dice left, or 3 dice left. With 2 dice, he was able to regrow some zombies on this specific unit. However, he was not able to cast the Arise in a bubble version of any kind. and that was obviously quite a shame. So yeah, my opponent's magic was not that impressive so far, and I think this is going to be the deciding factor for the game. So previous turn, my opponent was still able to summon sufficient zombies to prevent me from getting out of the combat in the middle of the field. But then in my turn, well, these 14 zombies that are left, 16 zombies, they are gonna go. Yeah, my repeater auxiliaries are still just shooting at his altar. However, they're not doing any wounds because of the AP0 and the 4-up Aegis on my opponent's machine. However, I don't really have any good other targets with this unit. Otherwise, in terms of charges, I charge into his other zombie block with my Obsidian Guard and with my Shadow Riders. The Shadow Riders, they're quite cool. So my opponent had to put a spell on them. I believe this round he did manage Eyes on Fire on them, knocking off 4 of them. So I only had 6 left, but still these 6 guys, once they charge in with a champion, they have 7 attacks at strength 4 with +1 to wound. So against zombies, they're really good because they hit on 2+, they wound on 2+. However, I believe they had a very bad dice roll, so they only did like 3 wounds or so. Yeah, and on the left, I am just starting to grind against the other zombies. So yeah, zombies really don't punch a lot in combat, because even against Dread Legionnaires are not the strongest unit in the game. However, they do have offensive 4, they do have lightning reflexes, they do have small bases, so they do have some killing potential. However, they still a unit of 18 Dread Legionnaires is gonna hit 15 times, and in ensuing combat, it's gonna wound like 7 or 8 times against zombies. I think the real problem is that the zombies don't really strike back that hard, because with 10 attacks they're gonna hit 5 times, wound 2 times, or 3 times. If they wound 3 times, you're gonna save one of those. So yeah, they might kill two Dread Legionnaires a turn. This is not really scaling up to the 8 zombies that you're losing a turn, especially since the Dread Legionnaires also discount the rank bonus of the opponent by 1, with them being academy trained. So that's another help for the Dreadies. So in my turn, I do manage to kill the zombies in the middle. My opponent's turn sees his zombie dragon fly out. Basically, he's like, "No, I'm out of here." Leaving his zombie block in the middle with his 2 necromancers. Yeah, just in the middle, really. And he also failed a March test on those, so the necromancers couldn't get away anymore. Yeah, this was a bit of a sad moment for my opponent. On the other side, it was a bright moment in the sense that the Ultra of Undeath is still running around, and it's now just in the middle of my lines with not a lot able to contest its dominance. Yeah, so the Ultra of Undeath is pushing its button, giving D6 strength 4 hits to every single thing of mine within 12 inches of it, even if it's in combat, crippling my entire army basically. It's not too bad, I believe. In total, in the end, it did something like 15 wounds or so. But I might be right. It might also be something more like 10 wounds, 10 to 15, I think. Of which 4 harpies that I don't really care about. So that was okay. Yeah, an Ultra of Undeath is a bit of a problem for Dread Elves, I feel. Because it's a model that your opponent does not want you to have access to. Dread Elves don't really have a lot of ranged damage output with the new book. Even repeater batteries, they only have 24 inches. You could fill a list with 3 of those and start shooting at stuff like Altars of Undeath, but then you do have to protect your backfield or be so offensive that your opponent does not have a way to get into your backfield. And you'll also possibly run into the problem of just having repeater batteries in your own way, in your own army line. But even if you have 3 repeater batteries, it's gonna net you 24 shots a turn. Long range, if they don't move, it's gonna be 12 hits against something like an Altar of Undeath. That's 6 wounds with resilience 5. You do go straight through armor, so you would say that it's dead, but it still has a 4 Vegas, so you would do 3 wounds a turn. And then with the magic of your opponent, you can assume that you can heal 2 wounds a turn, because it likely is going to be affected either twice by Gates of the Netherworld or by Arises. Yes, so you're not going to get rid of that, even with 3 repeater batteries. Yeah, so the logical thing happened in my turn. My dragon charged into his necro bunker together with the Gorgons. The Kraken was chaffed by his raids, or well, chaffed. The raids went in front of the Kraken. And well, the chances that they're gonna kill the Kraken are not too high. They hit on 5s and they wound on 4s. Every single 4 they roll is an automatic wound. However, I do strike first. I might, if I kill one of them, then he only has 7 attacks back at me. 5s, it's like 2 hits. It's like 1 wound a turn. I still have my Thunderstorm, so probably in the grind I'm gonna win that one. On the left were Marley's chopping away against the zombies. I found a use for the Harpies, which is to prevent the charge into the rear of my unit from the raids. However, probably my Dread Legionnaires are going to be sacrificed on the left. Well, they are just going to be the guys that are in the wrong place at the wrong time. I do manage to charge into the Altar of Undeath of my opponent with my Obsidian Guard that were behind it. You can't really see them there. But I do manage to do a couple of wounds to it, and I do manage to crumble it down through my combat resolution, because my opponent also doesn't manage to hit my Dread Elves mostly. So we do manage to kill that. And also we do manage to kill my opponent's Zombie Dragon, which was quite a big event actually of the turn. So his Zombie Dragon, he had an overrun into my Dread Legionnaires. He was first facing my Temple Militants, and I did have a champion in that unit. However, I chose not to issue a challenge because I wanted the unit to just be fully gone, leaving my opponent in a position where he could either choose to get charged by a unit of Dread Legionnaires and a unit of Temple Militants in the flank and a unit of Shadow Riders in the other flank, or to overrun into a unit of Spears and then have the same sandwich occur. So the sandwich did happen. I did get, well, my Legionnaires were in his front, the Temple Militants were in one flank, the Shadow Riders in another flank. And I did manage to cast No Die Enemy, so I got +2 agility on every single thing in range of the Temple Legate, and also the Temple Militants got +1 to wound. Now against Resilience 6, it didn't really matter because, well, whether you have strength 3 with +1 to wound or strength 4 with +1 to wound, you are gonna wound on 5+ anyways. But then my opponent did issue a challenge in this fight. My Temple Legate wisely rejected this challenge, so I just declined, leaving me with 18 attacks from the Dread Legionnaires sitting on 4+, and wounding on 5s, and then the Temple Militants, I believe it was still a full unit, so that's 18, 24 attacks with Battle Focus, with 5s to wound, with AP 0, however, and the Shadow Riders, I was just a couple of wounds, a couple of attacks extra. I believe in the end I managed to do 2 or 3 wounds to the dragon, and the dragon, well, he did a couple of wounds. I believe the Thunderstomp was something like 2 or 3, so that was not too many wounds, to be honest. And then still the combat rest came in, so I had a big flank, I had a charge, he also had a charge, however. But I had a big flank, I had a rank, another rank, I had 3 banners because the Shadow Riders also had a banner. And all in all, it was just way too much even to crumble in. And basically, with that we get quite close to the end of the game. My opponent is able to appoint a new master, because he still had 1 necromancer left. He did do that, but everything had to already test once to make a crumble test. Then in his round of combat, this other master also died, so then he had to take crumble tests all around again, which severely crippled his army. However, we were in turn 6, so that was a bit of a boon for him. I did manage to, well, he did manage to break my Dread Legionnaires on the left. He was pursuing with the zombies and with the raids. The raids are off table now. The only thing he has left on the table are the zombies, and I did manage to get a charge off with a Gorgon there and with some Obsidian Guard, I believe. And then in the ensuing combat, the Obsidian Guard completely flapped, killing only like 2 zombies or so, whilst they should have killed way more. The Gorgon did a bit of work, and then we crumbled them down to the man. Yeah, so my opponent only had 1 unit left, and the unit wasn't even on table, whilst I had a lot of my army still intact. I think it was also a bit of a bad matchup for my opponent, with Vampire Covenant being a combat-dedicated army and Dread Elves also being a combat-dedicated army, but being one that is really focused on just dashing it out in the first turn of combat, just spike damage. And yeah, if you have some models that can survive bashing and keep on grinding, then it's good. Then you're gonna probably outgrind the Dread Elves. But if you don't have a lot of damage potential yourself, then well, the Dread Elves are resilient enough to take a little bit of a beating from a couple of zombies. Especially with the offensive skill of 1. This is really crippling. Because against any elite unit, you're just hitting on 5+. And that is nothing, not really going to get you anywhere. Yeah, I think my opponent played quite okay. I think, well, generally in terms of list, if you run a zombie list, then the zombie dragon doesn't really fit in there. So I'd rather have seen just a Master Necromancer or the Vampire Crochet like he had. And then basically, I think you can fit in 2 units of Ghasts rather than the zombie dragon. Maybe you have to sacrifice 1 corpse card for this. I don't know even how good corpse cards are, but if you're running Ghasts, then corpse cards are quite nice to have. And then yeah, just 2 big units of Ghasts. But then if that is your army, then yeah, you're going to be a bit limited by mobility. However, if you have the Ghasts in front of your army and then there's all of these zombies in the back line, then I don't think there's a lot of armies that can get through all of it anyway. But that feels a little bit like a draw list. Yeah, so it had been a couple of weeks where I didn't upload a battle report, but well, I managed to finally get one up again. I hope you enjoyed this one. So yeah, if you did, please consider giving me a like. And if you have any comments, any suggestions, any questions, please just post them in the comments.